Hello, good morning, everyone. Apologies for the delay in starting the web cameras. We were having some technical difficulties. And so, without further ado, we're going to start the webinar. So, thank you, everyone, for joining in for the Emirates Green Building Council and Saint-Gobain's publication launch, Making UAE Schools Healthy, an in-depth measurement of indoor air quality. So, my name is Jason John, and I work as a technical engineer for the Emirates Green Building Council. I will be giving you a few of the sort of house webinar sort of rules, and with that we can begin on the webinar itself. So a bit of housekeeping. So as you'll notice as you join in, the control panel is on your right hand side of the screen. Whilst we are taking questions throughout the webinar itself, there will be no verbal questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the questions area during any point in the webinar. We're going to be having a presentation in which we will address those questions that you asked us, and we will also be having a panel discussion in which some of the questions will be answered there. We will also be sharing the recording of this presentation after the event to all registrants. As you exit the platform, please make sure that you complete the exit survey, as this helps to inform us for our upcoming events and webinars that we're planning throughout this year. And lastly, please follow EmiratesGBC and Saint-Gobain UAE on social media and post using the hashtags EGBC webinars and hashtag UAE Green Schools. So thank you everyone for joining in today. Once again, I would like to take this opportunity now to welcome His Excellency Dr. Ali Al Jassim, Chairman of the Emirates Green Building Council, to deliver his opening address. So Dr. Ali, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today on this webinar. It has been nearly a year since we have adopted to this new reality of meeting online, and this also means that we spend more time indoors. The topic of our discussion today to one of the most important segments of our society, students who are our future leaders. After months of uncertainty, our students are returning to school. While blended learning continues, there is a strong aspiration and desire among all of us that our schools return to normal operations. After all, what we can replicate the school environment and the comprehensive personal and social skill development that educational environments provide. That is why today's discussion is an important one. It gives us the platform to prepare and enhance our schools to become greener in their operations. Just as we nurture our children in our homes, we must make sure that the school's environment is safe and healthy for them to learn and grow, especially in the new reality. While many schools already have eco clubs and recycling initiatives, our discussion today is centered on an aspect that we have overlooked in the past. It is about indoor air quality, which we know is central to occupant well-being, more so for our young ones. Here in the UAE, as the region's leaders in driving sustainable development through visionary initiatives, our leaders is also focused on promoting healthy lifestyles. And this, you all will agree, assumes even more importance in the new reality. With its commitment to Paris Agreement and the overarching goal of working towards net zero building by 2050, the UAE has set a clear national priority to promote a cleaner, greener, and healthier environment. Through our session today, we are putting the spotlight on a less discussed aspect of indoor air quality. Realizing the need to promote dialogue on IEQ, we had in fact established the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools, which has hosted a series a series of roundtables, and initiated an in-depth study on the state of our schools with Saint-Gobain, UAE, a corporate board member of Emirates Green Building Council. I take this opportunity to thank Saint-Gobain and Paul Button, CEO of the organization, for the enthusiasm and tireless support he and his team extends to us. We identified a representative school to evaluate its indoor environment and benchmark the findings against regulatory specification and international best practices. My colleague will take you through in detail about the findings, but let me just mention that the study underlines the need for all of us to take proactive and prompt measures to enhance the indoor environmental quality of our schools. I agree that this is only a representative study, but the fact is that there has been no concerted efforts at the public or private sector level to study IEQ in our schools. And what we have done is the first decisive step to make a positive change. I also thank the school authorities for their willingness and support to conducting this study. The findings have been an eye-opener for them. We have outlined the findings and our recommendations in the report we will unveil today, which is titled Making UAE Schools Healthy, In-Depth Measurement of Indoor Air Quality. Several actions are recommended, such as updating local green building regulations to use air sampling devices instead of continuous monitoring. It is also important to make IEQ levels with regular inspection as a mandatory part of schools' rating. I will not go through further details, but would only like to reiterate that strong public-private sector collaboration is critical to enhancing the indoor environmental quality of our schools. As you know, we have over 1,000 schools in the UAE, and the mission of the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools is to make every one of them a green school. And in this journey, you all can play a central role. You can support and undertake sponsorship packages, which offer several benefits, including recognition as an Emirates Coalition for Green Schools champion. To make a difference, we need to act as one team. And I believe that the path-breaking study we reveal today will mark the beginning of a strong, decisive, and collaborative efforts to create and maintain greener schools. All the key stakeholders, such as school facilities management, designers, and green building consultants, manufacturers and suppliers, NGOs and research institutes, students, as well as the staff, have an important role to play in this regard. And our efforts complement the Centennial 2071 vision announced by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, UAE Vice President and Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai. We have several experts joining us today from across the world to share their views and insights, and I thank them for their participation. I also take this opportunity to thank my wonderful team at Emirates Green Building Council. They never cease to amaze me with their commitment and dedication to promoting a sustainable world, not just for today, but for future generations. I look forward to a constructive session, and I am confident that together we can make a positive difference. Thank you all.
Wonderful, and thank you for your inspiring words, Dr. Ali. It's really important to spread this message to the audience and the industry as much as possible. I would like to now take this opportunity to introduce our next welcome address, Paul Button, CEO of Saint-Gobain UAE. Paul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jason. So good morning, everyone. Hope you're all well. I'd like to start on behalf of Saint-Gobain by thanking the Emirates Green Building Council for the opportunity to partner in this critical study, which was just laid out before me. The study has been a real team effort. I thank everybody involved, including all of the Emirates Green Building Council team, And I would especially like to acknowledge His Excellency, Dr. Ali Jazim, the Chairman of the Emirates Green Building Council, for this initiative. Saint-Gobain has a very strong, long-standing and global partnership with the Green Building Council, where we're active in over 40 green building councils worldwide, and we're also a partner of the European Regional Network. At a global level, we have partnered with World Green Building Council in their Better Places for People and their Plant a Sensor campaigns, amongst many, many other projects. So clearly, Saint-Gobain and the Green Building Council share very similar values and objectives, which are the fundamental basis of a great partnership. The topic today of education is always very emotive for all of us. After all, this is where we nurture and where we educate our children and the future generations. So I guess in that context, it's very difficult to find anything which is more important. For me, this is why the study of making UAE schools so healthy is so significant. And it also clearly aligns with Saint-Gobain's purpose of making the world a better home. And clearly, education is very much part of the world we live in and our home. This said, I'm sure that we all agree not all of our educational facilities support the great education opportunities that we would like to deliver. So all of us today as industry leaders, we have a role and a responsibility to challenge, learn, develop, and ultimately improve the quality of the education that we deliver. We're all aware that sustainability and performance are critical components to educational buildings. And when we talk about performance from a perspective of air quality, but also acoustics, thermal and light comfort, these directly impact us as humans, as we all know and we're aware of. And when we create high performance educational buildings, we create and we increase productivity, motivation, communication, concentration, even memory. And we can also reduce things like stress and tiredness. So in simple terms, we're talking about high performance buildings supporting high performance education. That's really our objective here. I'm showing my age a little bit here, but in the late 90s, over 20 years ago, I had the pleasure of being involved in another study project, which was a partnership between Saint-Gobain, Heriot-Watt University and the UK government. And the research was looking at acoustics in education. And the study compiled of around 100 schools measuring acoustic performance. But importantly, the qualitative aspect of what children could actually hear and could learn. And the findings were really shocking. Many results, but I'll share one or two with you. Things like in 80% of the schools that were measured, less than 50% of the children could actually hear what was being taught. And this led, of course, to lack of concentration, sometimes misbehavior, sometimes poor exam results. And in essence, this can shape and direct the future of a child, which is clearly an unacceptable situation. So why am I sharing this story with you? Well, the study was a key driver in the UK government implementing mandatory acoustic regulations. So some of you may know the standard, actually. It's still often used now and referred to now. It's BB 93 or Building Bulletin 93. And since the implementation of Building Bulletin 93, nearly 20 years ago, the performance of educational buildings has dramatically improved as a direct result of a study, similar to the study that we're discussing today. And thus the quality of education for our children has improved. So of course this can be achieved with new buildings when we look at the correct design performance. But just as importantly and highlighted, we have already over 1,000 schools in the UAE, and we can address the existing school stock as well with retrofitting solutions, which improves performance as well. So we have to think about this from a new build, but I think more importantly from how we address the existing educational facilities we also have. So in summary, I truly believe that studies such as making UAE healthy can make a real difference in the education of our children. But as stakeholders, all of us here today, we need to take ownership of this. We have to take accountability, and we have to drive this. So I wish everyone success in the implementation of the study. And once again, I thank Emirates Green Building Council for this initiative. So thank you, and I hope you find the rest of today's event both informative but also inspiring.
Thank you, Paul, for mentioning the studies that you have done as part. It's great to see that the Saint-Gobain has been leading in leadership in the indoor environment, not only in presently, but also from the past. So thank you very much again, and thank you, Saint-Gobain, for also helping drive this project. So now we will move on to the presentation side of things, where we will discuss the results, findings, and recommendations from the study itself. So it is with my pleasure that I will now introduce our technical manager, Maj Fayad, who will be speaking on this. So Maj, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I would like to echo the words of Dr. Ali and Paul and welcome you all to this launch webinar. We are very excited to launch this study. It is the first of its kind in the Middle East to provide in-depth measurement of indoor air quality parameters in schools. There is no doubt that the pandemic brought more attention to indoor environment, to health and well-being, and to the role that buildings can play in improving the health and well-being of occupants. In the next slides, the project team will share with you our work during the last 2 years and the main findings of our study. Next slide, please, Jason. I would like to kick off with a brief about the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools. The coalition was officially launched in November 2017 with an aim to ensure that every child in the UAE learns in a green school. The term every child includes nursery up to university level students. In the UAE indicates that the coalition covers all Emirates, starting with key stakeholders in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and moving across all Emirates. The coalition aims to provide a platform for different stakeholders, including government authorities, schools, private sector, and the public, to discuss and exchange information about the state of existing schools in the UAE. It aims at raising awareness about solutions and best practices to make new and existing schools greener and make this information available for school administration and parents. We would also like to increase engagement with schools, school designers, and school operators to encourage energy efficient operations and retrofits of existing school facilities. The coalition supports government authorities and aims to drive policies and regulations towards improved sustainability performance in UAE schools. The last two objectives of the coalition are to foster partnerships, similar to the partnership between EmiratesGBC and Saint-Gobain, and to offer tools, resources, and research to support the growth of the green schools industry in the UAE. Next slide, please, Jason. In 2018 and following the launch of the coalition, Emirates Green Building Council published the State of Our Schools white paper, which aimed at establishing a definition for green schools in the UAE, assessing the current state of schools, and identifying the key stakeholders that should be engaged to effectively determine a course of action for the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools. Following extensive consultations with key stakeholders, the adopted definition for a green school is a school which provides a healthy environment for occupants. Occupants means students and staff, conducive to learning while optimizing environmental performance and encouraging environmental literacy. This definition makes it very clear that a healthy environment is very critical to a green school, as well as sustainability performance and environmental education. Another key outcome from the state of our schools was the collective agreement between different stakeholders that there are very limited number of schools, if any, in the UAE that fulfill the definition of a green school. This outcome highlights the need to improve schools' performance, and it also puts more emphasis on the role of the coalition in driving the conversation towards making our schools green and healthy. Next slide, please. Following the launch of the white paper, we hosted another consultation session in 2018, focusing on one aspect of green schools, indoor air quality. This topic was selected due to its importance and the increasing interest in the topic with both school and industry stakeholders. The stakeholders who participated in the roundtable agree that more efforts are required to improve the indoor environmental quality. It was also highlighted that there is lack of awareness on the topic and the impacts of indoor air quality on students' health, well-being, and learning abilities. The roundtable participants also identified the key stakeholders in the UAE that should be engaged. Government stakeholders such as KHDA, in Dubai, municipalities, and the Ministry of Education are the first group of stakeholders because they have direct influence on the school infrastructure through regulation and inspection. School stakeholders also, which include school owners and facility managers, have also a pivotal role to play in improving indoor air quality and the indoor environment conditions. Parents also have a very important role to play, especially in advocating towards improved indoor air quality parameters. It was also identified that more data, more publicly available data, is needed to establish a baseline for indoor air quality in UAE schools and to help support and build the case for improving infrastructure with these stakeholders. Next slide, please. To address the challenges identified in the roundtable, Emirates Green Building Council partnered with Saint-Gobain UAE to conduct a study to measure and evaluate the indoor air quality of a representative school. It also investigates the indoor environmental quality parameters such as acoustics and thermal comfort. Additionally, the study aims to increase the availability of data, the indoor environmental quality data, to identify areas for further research and improvement, and to provide case studies to raise awareness with stakeholders. It also supports the case for improving the indoor environmental quality in schools by outlining a call to action for improvement to diverse stakeholders. Next slide, please. The project team behind the study includes my colleague Jason John, technical engineer at Emirates Green Building Council, Dr. Nada Shami, head of product and innovation, Saint-Gobain UAE, Valérie Goletto, senior research and development project leader, Saint-Gobain Research France, and Vincent Guinou, analytic chemistry lab manager at Insulation Research and Development Center, and myself, technical manager at Emirates Green Building Council. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all. We couldn't have made it without your efforts in this project. Next slide, please. The study was carried out in several stages, which consisted of research, literature review, market research, and measurement of indoor environmental parameters of a school in the UAE. Nada will provide us with an overview of the research. Valérie and Vincent will brief us about the case study, the methodology, and the main findings. And at last, Jason will share the outlined call to action. Without further ado, I hand over to Nada to walk you through the research. Nada, over to you.
Thank you, Majd, and good morning to everyone. I'm very fortunate to be on this platform today for such a topical subject. 2020 has been a challenging but rewarding year working on this project with an amazing team. We had the opportunity to build and deliver a solid case study, but most importantly, to create a space for sharing knowledge, expertise, and also awareness around indoor environments, and more importantly, the impact it has on the occupant, especially when we are addressing children in educational environments. So the first phase of the project was a literature review. Next slide, please, Jason. So there is a lot of comprehensive research out there to support that IEQ, or indoor environmental quality, has a significant impact on the students' health, productivity, performance, physical and mental development. And by IEQ, we talk about light, we talk about acoustics, thermal comfort, and also indoor air quality. So we went back in our literature review to 2005 with one of the earliest review paper, which was done in the US. And since then, also many publications followed. One of them was recently published by Harvard in 2017. Saint-Gobain have also participated in many studies around the world. And more importantly, we partnered with World the Green Building Council in their Better Places for People campaign, where they have collected and shared a lot of documented data on the topic of schools and how a safe and healthy environment will support the children's learning potential. So I will be presenting today a brief and quick overview, of course, so that we can dedicate more time to the case study. But you can find the detailed review in our technical publication with, of course, all the references. So if we want to resume some of the main findings of these studies, first, we can definitely say that indoor air quality in schools is critical. It's critical because it has shown to be directly linked to students' performance, and also because children are more susceptible to indoor pollutants than adults. One of the studies concluded that the effect of indoor air quality on learning outcome is about 5 times higher than indoor air quality effects on the performance of employees reported in office space. Another important parameter related to indoor air quality is CO2 concentration. Studies have showed also that reducing the level of CO2 improved drastically the performance of first the psychological test and also the school tests. Also, there is a significant relationship between improved ventilation rates in green buildings with the test result of the children and also with absenteeism. The literature review helped us also to identify gaps in the literature. For example, we saw that the indoor air level of pollutants are not measured, and we know that considering only outdoor pollutant is not enough, since indoor pollutants have generally a large contribution because of their level of concentration and also the time of exposure. So for the other parameters, multiple studies have also been made on thermal, acoustical, and visual comfort. Paul has shared a good example of the acoustic study. I'm just going to mention 2 of the key findings. One of them that showed that processing speed, concentration, and math skills, it's positively correlated to higher diffuse ventilation rates, meaning lower noise coming from the HVAC system, and also dynamic lighting, meaning to have an optimum visual comfort inside of the room. Another study showed a correlation between low reverberation and low noise level in green schools and the performance for cognitive tests. For the UAE, we found that there are a limited public research available on this topic, and this is why it was key for us to conduct the study and to collect a complete set of quantitative and qualitative data. So moving on to the local regulation, there are, of course, local regulation in the UAE, which apply to all buildings, including educational. Dubai Green Building Regulation and Specification include indoor air quality criteria with quantitative values. So we can see for CO2, for total VOC, for formaldehyde, and for PM levels, as you can see mentioned in the table. Also, both Dubai and Abu Dhabi Green Building Codes have minimum ventilation requirements for new building. Thermal comfort is also addressed in the regulation, which is very important because not only it can impact the well-being of the occupants, but also it can impact the pollutant emission, as you will see in the case study later on. Unfortunately, 70% of the schools were built before these regulations, so it's difficult to say if IEQ parameters have been addressed during the design, especially if we don't have, during the operational phase, measurement to regularly track the indoor air quality or other comfort parameters. So moving on to the international regulation, on the next slide. So in the UAE, the most well-known and adapted international label for green building is LEED. And it's version V4 for building design and construction. We have prerequisites for indoor air quality that concern the design of the ventilation system. So we have minimum requirement based on ASHRAE and CN standards. And additional credits are being awarded for enhanced indoor air quality strategy, like, for example, indoor air quality assessment, whether before occupancy or under typical or normal one. So compared to Dubai Green Building Regulation, LEED is more stringent on formaldehyde and on PM limit values. It's also more stringent for TVOC because it includes also values for other individual VOC components, whereas in the Dubai regulation, it only sets a limit for total VOC. Another difference is that LEED recommends ISO method to measure those pollutants, whereas the Dubai Green Building Regulation recommend continuous monitoring. We will know more about these measuring methods in the case study. There is also LEED version 4 for existing building for operation and maintenance, and credit are also granted for enhanced indoor air quality strategy, which covers CO2 monitoring on a regular basis. We have also well standards. In the version 2, we have more focus on occupants' comfort, well-being, and health as compared to LEED. For the air quality, well version 2 has a total of 14 criteria, out of which 4 are mandatory and 10 are optional. The ventilation requirements are the same as LEED, but well version 2 has more strict value limits on indoor pollutants. It's also more stringent than UAE Green Building Regulation, and also it grants credit for air quality monitoring and requires the installation of many indoor air monitors for PM 2.5, PM 10, CO2, CO, formaldehyde, and TVOC. It also gives specific criteria on using the most appropriate monitors, which is very important because you will know more about the difference in the different monitors in the market today. Credit is also given to air quality awareness, which requires having a dashboard on display screen and or on the websites, so all the measurements related to indoor air quality are seen by everyone. This was a quick overview on the local and international standards. And now I will hand over to Valérie and Vincent, who will be presenting to you the case study in details. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Valérie.
Cool. So, Jason, do I have the lead on the slide? I have the hand on the slide? Or...
Yeah, I'm just going to hand over controls to you, Valérie. Just give me one moment.
No problem. So thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I had some technical issue to connect, but now everything goes well. So I'm very happy to be here this morning and to present with Vincent the result of this collaborative project between Saint-Gobain and the Emirates Green Building Council. Before entering into the details of the case study, just a few words about Saint-Gobain and the importance of indoor environmental quality and building science for Saint-Gobain. Thank you, Jason. I think now I have no. Oops. Okay. So actually, innovation is part of Saint-Gobain DNA, And innovation is not only a matter for R&D team, it's in fact a joint effort between different functions. It involves R&D, but also marketing, purchasing, and many other functions. And as part of the central R&D organization, it's one of our missions to support our local teams and share with them our expertise. Indeed, at central R&D level, a few years ago, a transversal program dealing with building science was launched with the objective of developing capabilities and tools to support our local businesses to develop products, systems, and services that will address the Saint-Gobain multi-comfort and guarantee occupants performance, comfort, and well-being. So indoor air quality is one of the pillars of this building science program. And so I am involved with Vincent. We are both working together with the team on the indoor air quality pillar within this building science program. And throughout the years, we have been developing and acquiring knowledge on the different aspects of indoor air quality. And we have in fact in-house facilities to perform experimental tests according to standards, both at lab scale and at full scales. We also developed some communication tools, such as the edited book. We edited some illustrated booklets, which target non-experts in IAQ, and which are available both for our internal team, but also for our external consumer. And you can download them on the Saint-Gobain multi-comfort website. So when NADA contacted us to take part to this collaborative project with EGBC, it was a great pleasure and a great opportunity for us to join. We know we have been working on indoor air quality for a while. We know that it's a topic that it's not very easy to address with our customer. We hear a lot about outdoor air pollution, but we need to make people more aware that indoor air quality matters. And it's even more so true with the current pandemic. And we think that now people get more awareness on the importance of indoor air quality, even more than outdoor air quality. And as Nada mentioned, during our literature review, we didn't find many public data available regarding indoor air quality in UAE school. So that's why we propose to run this case study in a representative school in Dubai to collect as many data as possible and to support the vision of Emirates Coalition for Green School that Madge presented to you before. Before actually running the campaign, in fact, we had to go through very important preparatory steps, I would say. So the local team had to identify a school location that could be a representative and go through approval by the school management to have the case study being performed in the school. Once this first approval was obtained, a school visit could be organized to find the representative location within the building where we could actually perform the measurements. And based on this first school visit, we were able to design the case study and the detailed experimental setup. And of course, having this case study protocol finalized, we review it with the school management once again to get the final approval. And once everything was fine, we could go and actually and run the campaign. And I must say that those preliminary steps were very important and very critical. And the school management was very collaborative during the preparation, and even when we were running the campaign, we were very well welcome on site. So so regarding the school, so the school that was identified is quite a large school and quite an old school, I must say, for comparing to the setup of the local green building regulations. So we identified in this building, in this school, 3 classrooms that we consider for the EAQ measurements. So we used two occupied classrooms, kindergarten and elementary classroom, where the children activity would be different. So to see if it could have an impact on the indoor air quality. We also considered an unoccupied classroom that we will consider as a reference room for our case study. And as usual, when you are performing indoor air quality measurement, we have some measurements being done outdoor as another reference point. So Vincent will detail the results of the indoor air quality measurements. Just to give you an overview, so for this study, we decided to combine 2 types of IAQ measurements. Standard methods of air sampling, so air sampling through cartridges that are analyzed in a second step in a laboratory, so active sampling and passive sampling. And those methods give a punctual measurements during the time of the sampling. And we combine them with continuous monitorings, which are non-standardized methods, but that gives very valuable qualitative and comparative values information for the case study. And so we monitor continuously carbon dioxide, formaldehyde, and TVOC. And of course, usually when we perform IAQ measurement, we also measure continuously temperature and relative humidity. So we use 3 continuous monitoring devices, one that is specific to formaldehyde and 2 different ones to monitor TVOC. And Vincent will detail the results. As mentioned, the primary focus of this case study was on indoor air quality, but at Saint-Gobain, we have a more global approach and we want to provide multi-comfort, including thermal, visual, and acoustic aspects. So we did some preliminary measurements of acoustic, noise level, and the amount of natural light in the classroom by using an homemade device called the MC350. MC stands for multi-comfort. And this small device that you can see here works with an application on the smartphone. Regarding the focusing back on the indoor air quality measurement, as I said, we combine continuous monitoring and air sampling techniques. We wanted to have information about the indoor air quality in the classroom in a representative day of class. So we decided to design the campaign to have several measurements run during a single day to collect information on the impact of the occupancy in the classroom and the impact of the ventilation system in the classroom. In the school, the HVAC system is a centralized HVAC system, which is switched on every morning at 6 a.m. before the children arrive, and which is switched off very early in the afternoon after class is finished at 3 p.m. So having these four measurements done during the day, we would have before the children arrive, when the children are in class with the HVAC on, in the afternoon with the HVAC on, and when the children have left the class and without the ventilation. And overnight, we use passive sampling to have an average value and the continuous monitoring all along the full duration of the campaign. So the campaign was actually run, as I say, I forgot to mention, but it was 1 year ago, so in February, during 4 days. So for all the measurements that we are going to present, each time we compare with the limit values set by the local green building regulations. So in this case, with the Dubai green building regulation that Nada mentioned. And when we are measuring data that are not mentioned in this green building regulation, we compare them with the other international well-known green buildings such as LEED and WELL. So let's now enter the details of the study findings. So the carbon dioxide is not directly a chemical pollutant, an indoor chemical pollutant, but it provides very valuable information because it's an indirect indication of the quality of air renewal and basically of the quality of the ventilation system in a room. And it's also very easy to, it's easy to find sensors, not very expensive sensor to measure CO2 concentration in a continuous way. So on this graph, the green curve represents our average CO2 concentration in one of the two classrooms. And without any surprise, we can see that the CO2 variations follow the occupancy inside the class. We know that CO2 source is coming from occupants that breathe inside the room. What is commonly acknowledged is that above a certain concentration of CO2, usually considered to be at 1000 ppm, we start to experience some uncomfort. And in the case of children, it will impact their learning abilities and concentration, for example. I'm pretty sure you've all experienced in a meeting, a 2-hour meeting, where you feel sleepy in the meeting room after a while, and most of the time, maybe due to a high level of CO2 in the room. So actually, the Dubai Green Building Regulation sets the threshold value at 800 ppm, which is quite even more stringent. And on this graph, we have represented with the color code the different range, so below 800 and orange and red for what we consider uncomfortable and even more critical conditions. On this table, you can find the average value, the minimum and maximum value recorded in this classroom for the 2 days. What is important is not only the peak value, it's how often we reach this peak value. So in fact, we calculated the amount of time that the children spend during the class and are exposed to values above, in this case, 1000 ppm or even more at 1600 ppm. And you can see that, in fact, as soon as the class starts, the CO2 concentration exceeds the threshold value of 1000, and the conclusion is obviously the same if you set the limit at 800 ppm. So clearly, a first finding of this analysis is that CO2 is clearly too high in the classroom. And from the very beginning in the morning, it can reach very high values. And we think that this is mainly due to the ventilation, to the HVAC set point in the building, which is not well dimensioned regarding the occupancy of this classroom. Actually, the result is very similar to the other classrooms that we monitor. It's a dark green curve on this graph. So same conclusion. And for the reference room, that is the unoccupied room, the light green curve of this graph, we have indeed a quite unexpected behavior, because as this room is unoccupied, we would have expected the CO2 level to remain constant at the outdoor level, which is around 400 ppm, which is not the case because we see some variations similar as in the other rooms. So this, we think it's due, we know that the HVAC system is recirculating part of the air and brings only partially some fresh air from the outside. So we think that this recirculation, in fact, is the reason why we have this effect, and it promotes cross-contamination. CO2 is coming from the other room to this empty room. And what we have here with CO2, we may have the same impact of this recirculation on the redispersion of pollutants. So this indication is also, this result is also another additional information about the HVAC system, which we think could be, which we would recommend to improve in the building. One final thing I would like to mention. So HVAC is switched off at 3 p.m. just after the children left the class. And After that, the decay is due to it's a natural decay of the CO2 through the building envelope through air leakage. And we can see that this decay is different in the two rooms. So also indicating that so the building envelope have different impact. But what is important is that, in fact, it takes quite a very long overnight to reach back a very low level of CO2. And this room, when the HVAC system is switched on again the next morning, it has not even reached the 400 ppm. So the air renewal and the natural decay during night is not enough to make sure that the next morning we start from fresh. So CO2 provide very useful information, valuable information. And we also have a look at temperature and humidity. Even if we know they are not direct indicator of the indoor air quality in the building, we know they can have an impact on the pollutant emission. And so on this graph, so we have temperature in orange and relative humidity in gray. The table is indicated the mean value recorded in the two classrooms in the two successive days. We can see that the color code is comparing this value to the Dubai Green Building Regulation and specification. We observe that we have a difference of temperature between the two classrooms, which we consider to be due to the HVAC settings. What is important is for relative humidity. So we have first a difference in between the room, but the most important is that from one day to the other, we have an important difference and a decrease of the humidity in the classroom. During the same period, we collected the information about outdoor relative humidity level, and actually the indoor humidity level follow the variation of the indoor humidity level is fully consistent with the variation of the outdoor humidity level during the same period. So from this, we can conclude that the HVAC system is not doing anything on the humidity level to control it in the indoor. It's just bringing the outdoor humidity to the indoor. But as a result, we can see that when outdoor is very humid, it's also very humid indoor, and it's not very good both for thermal comfort, but also for indoor air quality, because we know that humidity can promote mold issue. So having said that, I will now leave the floor to Vincent, who will continue with the detailed results on chemical pollutants.
Thank you, Valerie. Good morning,
Let's
everyone.
start. I've given you control over the keyboard and mouse.
Okay, thank you. So now we will continue with the chemical pollutant evaluation. But first, okay, I want to move the slide. So now we will continue with the chemical pollutant evaluation. But first, I would like to share some information and take 1 minute to define the parameter we have considered in the chemical pollutants. So the first one, called TVOC, so for total volatile organic compounds, it's an indicator of the global chemical pollutant level in the room. There are two different ways to define these results. The first one given by the continuous monitoring, where we use sensor which react with chemical and give directly a signal on site. And the second way is to use air sampling with cartridges, where we catch VOC on these cartridges, but after we need to have a step in lab to perform the analysis. And so there is no direct reading on site. And in this case, the TVOC value is the sum of all individual VOCs we can obtain between hexane and hexadecane. So it's the definition of this value. That's why it's not exactly the same result between the both way of measurement. And with the air sampling, we have also another additional information about the individual VOCs, because we are able with the lab analysis to identify each chemicals present in the air, and we are able also to evaluate the concentration of each pollutant. So it helps to establish the link between this pollutant and some health impact or well-being. That's why it's really complementary approach by comparison with continuous monitoring. And last but not least, formaldehyde is always included in all indoor air quality study because it's a key pollutant for indoor air, and so we will see the result also for this pollutant. So let's start with the results from the most global view of the chemical presence in the air, so the TVOC by continuous monitoring. So you can see here on the graph on the orange curve, so the signal for the TVOC by comparison with the results presented by Valérie on CO2. And the first observation is that the TVOC concentration follows the same trend than CO2. When we have a certain level of VOC during the night, and when we have the children in the room, we have an significant increase of VOC, and when the class is finished, we have a decrease of VOC. So this is the first conclusion. We have here on this graph the results for the elementary classroom, but it's the same conclusion for the kindergarten classroom. The second point on these results is the difference of maximum value reached for the first day and the second day. We have a lower value on the second day, even if we have similar activities and the same number of children all over the period. And one aspect to take into consideration is the change of relative humidity between the 2 days. And temperature and humidity are known to have an impact on emission and VOC, and so we could have an impact of this decrease of VOC, relative humidity between the 2 days on the value of VOC. So in terms of study findings, with the current setting of the ventilation, we have the same conclusions than for CO2. Pollutants are accumulating very fast when we have occupancy. So now when we compare the different devices to evaluate VOC by continuous monitoring. So Valérie presents you in our methodology, we have decided to test 2 different types of devices. And when we compare the first device, so in orange, and the second device in dotted line, you can see that we don't have the same results. We have the same trend. When there is a peak of VOC detected on one device, we detect the same peak on the second device, but the absolute value is not the same of the different devices. And a few years ago, we have done within our transversal program a study to evaluate the sensor, and we obtained the same conclusion that there is several available commercial sensors on the market, but it's really difficult to obtain the same absolute value on all of these sensors due to the technology used for this sensor. It's not always the same sensitivity and not the same selectivity according to the type of chemical present in the air. So it's quite difficult to compare the absolute value. it's not enough consistent to be able to compare with some regulation or limit values. That's why, depending of the device used, we could obtain not the same conclusion if we compare, for instance, with the Dubai Green Building Regulation and Specification limit value. That's why the learning of this result is we recommend to consider air sampling monitoring instead of continuous monitoring to determine the real concentration of TVOC, and use continuous monitoring to follow up the evolution and to have a global view. Is very useful to have the global view, but for absolute value, we must pay attention of this. So now the TVOC by air sampling. So we sample the air with a pump and we catch VOC on specific cartridges. We have an analysis step in a lab, and we are able to obtain a TVOC value, i.e. the sum of all individual VOC. And we obtained this result for the 3 classrooms. One remark on this result is we perform sampling on different days for each room. And you can observe that for elementary classroom, we have a lower value. And these results are consistent with the trend we observe with continuous monitoring, where we have a decrease of the signal of TVOC with continuous monitoring on the last day of the campaign, linked to the decrease and the impact of climatic conditions. The other point for this result is the level of TVOC between empty room and kindergarten. We have globally the same level of TVOC, meaning that even without occupancy, we have VOCs in the classroom. And it is consistent with the remark and the observation on CO2 measurements, where we identify the cross-contamination between rooms. And even if there is nobody inside, we have the same level of pollutants through the ventilation system. And now, if we compare with this value with the Dubai Green Building Regulation and Specification, you can see that for both room we are above the limit, and for the elementary classroom we are below the limit. But according to the signal we have on VOC with continuous monitoring, we can expect that the 3 classrooms should be above the limit on the day 1 and day 2, and all classrooms should be below the limit on the 3rd days of the campaign. So we confirm the cross-contamination through CO2 and through the TVOC measurement. And the other point is it's easier to be confident in the evaluation with this type of sampling. And with this type of analysis, we are able also to have more information about what is the main chemical and what is the main family of compounds present in the air. And for this case study, the main family are BTEX. So this is a family of aromatic compounds that we often found in the indoor air. So BTEX for benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. We have alkane and terpene. And so now we will go deeper in this analysis by looking for individual VOCs. So here you can find a list of the main compounds we find in the sampling, several chemicals. But the main information is that we have obtained the same mix of pollutant in the 3 classrooms. So it's consistent also of cross-contamination because we have a mix of the air, and we distribute this air through in all the classroom of the building. The main component, if we go more in detail in the family, we have acetone as the main component present in the air, and after, two of them are latex and terpene. We could link this molecule with different sources of emission: traffic exhaust, indoor activities, materials and furniture of the building, and cleaning products. And for this part, the cleaning products, we could find some link with very specific compounds with odorant molecule used for the perfume in the fragrance in the cleaning product. So I put some example of this compound. And so one way to reduce VOC in the air is, for example, to select another type of cleaning products with a low VOC or with a specific eco label to reduce the quantity of this compound present in the air. Another learning, a key learning of this measurement is detection of one specific molecule only in one classroom, in kindergarten classroom, is the 1,4-dichlorobenzene. This molecule is not so friendly. It's used as repellent against rats, mice, and insects, and it's suspected to be carcinogenic. And it's only present in the kindergarten classroom. As there is no specific limit value in the Dubai Green Building Regulation specification, we compare with other international green building certification, and we found a limit in the WELL certification of this compound based on a limit at 400 micrograms per cubic meter. So we are below this limit value in our case study, but due to the type of the molecule, we recommend to investigate to find the source of this compound to try to eliminate or reduce as much as possible the concentration of this compound. And we do the same analysis for all other individual VOC by comparing with the limit value of the WELL certification based on the 35 specific compounds defined in the certification, and all individual VOC are below this limit. So as you can see, with the air sampling, we have access to another information, and it's really valuable information to track the source of emission and try to improve the level of VOC, and not only through the TVOC value. And last but not least, formaldehyde. So formaldehyde, as I said in the introduction, is a key pollutant for indoor air. And in our case, when we compare the different value in different classrooms, we see that we have the same concentration in the air inlet of each room and in the middle of the room. That confirms the cross-contamination between rooms. And when we compare with the outdoor value, we are much lower in the outdoor. So it's consistent that it's a specific indoor pollutant, and we have the cross-contamination. Now, when we compare this value with the Dubai Green Building Regulation and Specification limit value, we are far below this value, so there is no problem on that. But as for VOC evaluation, we compare also with other international green building certification, and we take the limit value for lead or WELL is defined at 30 micrograms per cubic meter. And even with this limit, most of the value are below, even one value for the air inlet in kindergarten, but we are below this limit. So we don't detect any issue with the formaldehyde level. But the point here is the impact of this pollutant for children, because formaldehyde is carcinogenic. We know that we found it in all indoor air and in all places. So it's a pollutant of high interest for indoor air. And the World Health Organization recommend to take some immediate action when children are exposed to a value of 100 micrograms per cubic meter for more than 30 minutes. And as the Green Building Regulation in Dubai defined this limit value for 8 hours, our recommendation is to discuss and to try to be more stringent on this threshold and take into consideration the other green building certification on this point. So no issue in this case study, but there is something to discuss about this limit. And now, so this is the main results and main learning of the chemical aspect of the case study. And now I will give the end to Valérie to describe the other parameter as acoustics and luminance.
Thank you, Vincent. So just some quick information about the other parameters. So as we said, the focus was on EAQ for this case study, but with our device, we were able to get some preliminary information about acoustics by recording the noise level in one of the classrooms. So you have here the noise level record in one of the classrooms for the duration of the day, with what is considered to be the comfortable zone represented here. So we can see that the noise level reached quite a high value, in fact, similar to a road with traffic when the children are here. And even when the room is unoccupied, the noise level is still above the standard, the comfortable zone. So we could think of maybe to improve also this parameter. Regarding natural light in the classroom, we've made some illuminance measurements, and the value are indicated here, and they are very low compared to what is considered as to be the comfortable zone at 1000 lux. So it's true that we could see in the classroom on the windows that there were window films, which are probably here to avoid during the hot period to have too much heat and maybe too much light entering the classroom. And in addition to this window film, on some of the windows, we could even see that some teachers or children have put some paintings, drawing, probably also to improve thermal and visual comfort during the hot period. So these early findings, for sure, will need to be completed by other measurements, but seems to indicate that for other comfort aspects that could still be improved in this school. So globally, so this is the main finding of the case study that we have performed. So to our knowledge, this is the first published study in the UAE that combine standard earth sampling method and continuous monitoring. And we hope that we have proved to you that it shows the complementary of both types of measurements. I forgot to mention, but in fact, for the measurements, we use a third-party lab that is an accredited lab by the Dubai municipality. And at the same time, we also did our own measurements so that we have quite a set of valuable data. So this study was performed only for a few days in February, which is not the hottest period for Dubai. For sure, it would be interesting to see what the result would be in the hottest period, and we could expect that it should be worse actually. But based on the measured parameters, we can already provide what we think are valuable recommendation to the school management to improve the current situation and target the green school criteria. So regarding indoor air quality, we mentioned several times that the ventilation system is probably a reason why we have an issue with air renewal and an issue with cross-contamination. So it could be interesting to review the setting of the central HVAC system. Also regarding the impact of the control of the humidity in the building. Regarding VOC, Vincent mentioned that some of the VOCs are we think linked to the cleaning product which are used in the school, and we could already limit their contribution by selecting fragrance-free cleaning products or products with eco label to reduce their contribution. And if the school plans to have a retrofit, both for indoor air quality but also other aspects, for VOC reduction, we could recommend to use a low VOC emitting construction product or product with depolluting capabilities. And for the other comforts, we could also make some recommendation to improve the acoustic, the thermal and visual aspect, and the thermal comfort provided by the building envelope. And so just to conclude on my side, in fact, at Saint-Gobain level, we can propose solutions and systems that address these different aspects that I mentioned for new construction, but also for retrofitting. So construction product with low VOC or construction product with depolluting performance, such as the active air technology, which can be included in plaster boards for partition or in acoustic ceilings, and also some other products with low VOC for insulation and for tile fixing. And for the construction market, we also make sure that all these products comply to local certification and labeling schemes, and the local team can provide you those documents for the different products. So I think I will leave back the floor to Jason now.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Valerie, for guiding us through the case study results. So my section, I'll be talking about on the call to action. So it is important to realize that for the purpose of the study, only one school was selected, and which was an atypical school. So it does not reflect accurately on the state of all UAE schools, but based on our work over the past few years with the Emirates Coalition and the roundtables, as well as the results from the studies, we have listed out several recommended actions as a call to action to diverse stakeholders across the UAE to ensure that there is coordinated action and movement towards improving the indoor environment of the UAE schools. So for policymakers, the recommended actions is obviously to update the local green building regulations and use air sampling and not continuous monitoring, to update local regulations to include identification of individual VOCs, set and mandate IEQ standards and codes in new and existing schools, have thorough and regular inspections of IEQ levels incorporated with their school ratings or their performance, and lastly, to provide incentives or to enact policy enabling the IEQ industries. For schools as the main stakeholders, obviously they have an integral role to play in incentivizing or transforming existing schools towards green and healthy schools. And the recommended actions for them is obviously to lead by example by monitoring and measuring the IEQ performance in their own respective schools and publicly disclosing them. Also making sure that they have thorough and regular inspections and maintenance of the various building systems, set appropriate targets for IEQ performance, and advocate towards the role of schools in improving health and well-being to both parents, students, and various parent committees. Naturally, it only follows along that parents, students, and school staff, so the building occupants and as well the parents of the students, have an important role as they are directly or indirectly affected by the indoor environment within the school itself. So really, it's their responsibility, and the recommended action or the call to action we tell them is to continually question and check the IAQ performance within the school and inform the authorities on this inadequate IQ performance for learning within the schools, to act as an influential and advocacy group on the school management to improve the performance. They can also collaborate within their parent to teacher school or their professional and social communities and their networks to inform, educate, investigate, advocate, and or address IQ issues within their schools. And lastly, they can always showcase and highlight the findings of this report to their respective schools for further investigation and remedial actions. For building designers and green building consultants, obviously they also have a natural role to play within the design and construction of green buildings, especially in schools. And it is recommended for them to specify adequate IQ factors when designing schools as per best practice, and also to specify low VOC building materials and products. They have a very, very important role in ensuring that any deviation from the design and specification during the construction phase should not compromise IAQ within the completed school. And lastly, they should also actively engage with their clients and their customers to making sure that they're pushing for them to improve the IAQ within the life cycle of the project. The manufacturers and suppliers over here, the stakeholder that we've identified is not only limited towards the manufacturing suppliers towards construction materials only, but also to the various suppliers and manufacturers for all the products that are used within the school. So this includes, for example, the carpets, the curtains, the durables, the cleaning products as well. So our call to action to them is to make sure that they understand and disclose their health implications or impacts of their products through various market mechanisms such as the MSDS or health product declarations or declare labels. They should ensure that none of their products use any sort of dangerous or toxic chemicals, or are biodegradable, or are eco-certified within their respective product and industry. They should develop product and materials catalogs or ranges that promote health and well-being through their various R&D teams or the manufacturing and product development teams. And lastly, they should also advocate for the betterment of health and well-being through their products. And last but not least, NGOs and research institutes have also just a vital role to play as well, because of their wide network. They can reach and collaborate with several other stakeholders that would not normally be possible within their others networks. So what they can do is they get recommended call to action for them is to provide further research and proof of concept and case studies to support improving IQ in schools, and also helping to increase the number of studies linking student performance in UAE schools and make that publicly available. They should also actively engage and collaborate with the government to influence policy towards healthier schools, engage and collaborate with schools and develop solutions towards better IQ performance, and lastly, advocate and build awareness for better IQ across the entire networks. So with this, I am happy to say that the link to the report is available on our website. You can just click on the link. We will be sharing this around as well on the chat, as well as the after the event post emails. We will be sharing the link of the reports. Both the full technical report is available, which highlights everything to the methodology, to the results and recommendations and call to actions, as well as this concise report, which basically highlights the key recommendations for improving IQ in schools, as well as the call to action. And as Mads had mentioned as well, to learn more about the Emirates Coalition for Green Schools, please follow the link that is provided on the screen and will also be provided via email to find out how you can help in making the transformation of existing UAE schools and new schools towards green schools in the UAE. So thank you everyone for this. We initially had planned for questions, but given the time now, we're going to be unfortunately moving past the Q&A section for the presentation. We have received your questions and you don't have to worry, as we will be logging them in and replying to you after the webinar. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on, as we also have a panel discussion planned for today's event. So thank you for your patience and understanding, and we're going to be moving towards the panel discussion. So it is with my pleasure that I am going to be introducing our esteemed panelists for today. I will be introducing our moderator for today's session as well. And I kindly ask, as I introduce each and every one of you, to turn on your cameras and your web cameras and microphones so that everyone can hear and see you. So I will start with our moderator for today's panel, Dr. Walid Yaqub, Director of the Emirates Green Building Council, who will be moderating today's event. Thank you, Walid, for joining us and for lending us your expertise. Joining us today for the panel is Katrina Brady, who is the Director of Strategy and Development at the World Green Building Council. Her work is focused upon development and implementation of new global and regional projects and programs at the World Green Building Council, and providing strategic oversight of existing work to ensure alignment to World GBC strategies for sustainable built environment. As part of her role, she oversees the Better Places for People's global project, which aims to help the Global Green Building Council network achieve a built environment that is healthy and sustainable for people. Welcome, Katrina. I would take this opportunity to also introduce Corinne Mandan, who has been working on human exposure to chemicals in indoor environments first at the French National Institute for Industrial Environment and Risks, and now at the French Scientific and Technical Center for Buildings. She leads the French Indoor Air Quality Observatory, created by the French government in 2001 to carry out nationwide surveys on indoor air quality in buildings. She is a member of the expert committee related to air at the French Agency for Environmental Health. She collaborates with the WHO and the European Joint Research Center, and she is also currently the president of the International Society for Indoor Air Quality and Climate. So thank you for joining us today, Corinne.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Next, we have Avinash Kumar, who began his career as an architect in India, where he participated in a number of projects ranging from hospitality to education. He moved to Dubai to join Goodwin Austin Johnson as a senior architect in 2005 and continued to be involved in educational projects, most notably the Ladybird Early Learning Center and Arcadia Preparatory School, both in Dubai. He has been responsible for a number of key projects in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, including school and hotel projects, as well as a mixed-use residential development in India. Welcome, Avinash.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks.
Good morning. And it is my privilege now to welcome Graham Scott, who has over 35 years of experience in education, with 24 years in leadership positions in the UK, Hong Kong, Netherlands, Thailand, and the UAE. In 2018, Graham became founding director of Fairgreen International School, Dubai, the Middle East's first fully sustainable school, offering all 4 programs of the International Baccalaureate. Graham is on the advisory board for Sea Change Mentoring, a US-based organization that focuses on well-being, advice, and mentoring for international high school students. Thank you and welcome, Graham.
Thank you.
Next, we have Abdel, who is a senior associate in Estidama team at the Department of Municipalities and Transport. Since the launch of Estidama in 2010, Abdel Alim has been working on the implementation of the Pearl rating system as a core Estidama team member. He is responsible for the implementation of the Estidama Pearl rating system, reviews submissions for compliance, and provides technical assistance to project teams in applying the PRS requirements. Welcome, Abdel. And finally, but not least, we have Engineer Mohammed Al-Dhanani, the Safety Section Manager, joining us from Dubai Municipality. Welcome, Engineer Mohammed. So, Dr. Willie, the floor is yours. Please welcome the participants, and you can begin the panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you. I would like to say thank you for all our panelists, and if I may give just a quick introduction, I joined Emirates Green Building Council about 2 months ago, beginning of this year. And before joining the council, I used to work in the building construction industry. I used to work as a consultant in the UK. I started my employment in the UK as a consultant and a senior sustainability consultant, working in the construction industry and the building industry. And I moved to UAE in about 2012. Mr. Paul mentioned something very interesting at the beginning of this event regarding BB 93, which is the acoustic performance requirement. From my previous employment in the UK, I can assure you that schools, the requirements for schools are really, really stringent. I mean, in addition to BB 93, there is BB 101, which is the thermal comfort analysis, and there is the daylight analysis. These studies are like a must when it comes to schools compared to other buildings. So it is really, really stringent. And as Mr. Bosso mentioned, that one study can open doors for lots of opportunities for many people to benefit from. We have got a very interesting study here where we have got many parameters investigated. Okay, and I would like to just to add a little bit about or emphasize about the impact or the importance of air quality in general. I mean, with the growth in population and the rapid increase in the industrialization, we can see that air quality is becoming a very important issue day by day. And when it comes to the how it's going to impact the indoor environment, and especially the indoor environment of schools, it is becoming more significant. So we know that many organizations, such as the World Green Building Council, have taken the lead to produce very useful publications related to health and well-being. And this includes also educational infographics for green and healthy schools. One of their latest publications work is actually launching health and well-being framework. So Katrina, as a senior staff in the World Green Building Council, can you please give us more insight on how the industry can utilize and benefit from this framework to promote healthier buildings? And also, if you can share with us some of examples for utilizing this framework. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Walid, and good morning, everybody from London. It's a pleasure to be able to join you. Thank you, Walid, and the Emirates Green Building Council team for having me today. The first thing I want to say is just a huge congratulations to the team at Emirates Green Building Council in Saint-Gobain for putting together this fantastic study. I have had the pleasure of hearing regular updates from the Saint-Gobain team and from the EmiratesGBC team over the last year or so. And I'm really very interested in this project, as I used to be a secondary school teacher before going into the world of sustainability myself. So I feel it's a culmination of two passions and professional backgrounds, and want to offer my congratulations firstly. I think this is going to be a very impactful report regionally and globally. From the World Green Building Council perspective, as a quick note of explanation, we are the membership network that unite the 70 national green building councils around the world. So, for example, Emirates Green Building Council is one of our most established members, and we work to bring together the green building councils regionally, globally, as well as supporting the work that's happening nationally. And a big focus of my work is on health and well-being, as Walid kindly stated there, and as Jason mentioned in the introduction. And last year, at the end of last year in November, we published a new health and well-being framework, as Walid just mentioned. And within this framework, we wanted to create, or we did create rather, a set of guiding principles that we were hoping would redefine the scope of health and well-being in the built environment. Literally put into one area everything that must be considered when we're talking about this very, very relevant topic of health and well-being. Air quality is principle 1.1 within the framework, so it's a very relevant part of it. It's the first thing that you read if you go into the report or into the full framework. But one of the purposes of us publishing that report was to try and expand industry awareness and ambition of all the different ways that the built environment sector and all the typologies within it can impact people's health in different ways. And I think looking at schools as an example, one of the things I think that's fantastic about this report is, yes, we're talking about children and we're talking about their educational capabilities and creating an environment for them to learn, but we're also talking about the teachers, and we're talking about the people who come into the building to do additional jobs, people who are coming in and out to clean or supporting staff. We should also be talking about the health and well-being of the construction workers, and we are, given that we're talking about having non-toxic construction materials. And it's this whole life cycle ambition of health and well-being, the equivalent to embodied carbon, but for health, really looking at the entire life cycle of health and well-being impacts that we are advocating for through this framework. That we must not only look at the occupants of buildings, but look at every single person whose quality of life and health and well-being is impacted by this sector. Now, this is obviously an extremely ambitious scope. So we released this at the end of last year, and we're working to socialize these ideas and release them into the industry with supporting materials, and to work with our Green Building Council members to use this information in a number of ways, whether that's training or education, the enhancement of rating tools, building into projects on the ground, or the development of accompanying resources that can be used for projects that are already operational, or of course advocacy to ensure that every area of health and well-being that needs to be considered should be advocated for at city or regional level guidelines. So I'll drop the link to this framework in the chat box for people who would like to read a little more, but I will stop there. We'll let somebody else give us an update. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Now, if we look from a different angle, from policy making, for a totally different view. So, Corinne, you have been leading the way for driving focus on indoor air quality for several years in France. So what do you think are the key drivers for directing attention of policy makers to show the significance and the importance of indoor air quality? And in your opinion, what is the best way to build awareness of this topic to the public sector?
Yeah, thank you very much to the organizer, to Emirates Green Building Council and Saint-Gobain for having invited me to them. Very happy to be with you, and congratulations for the huge work you did and for this nice call for action. So coming to your question about the policy makers, this is true that this is very hard to have them on board, because for two reasons, I would say. They have so many topics to manage regarding environment, but regarding economy and social, and so it's not easy to have the indoor air quality topic on the agenda. And the second reason why it's difficult is that it's invisible. Indoor air quality is invisible compared to emission from industries, for example. So many people, most of the people, thinks that there is no pollution in buildings. The children and the people in the office are protected from outdoor pollution. So I would say that I have identified three key drivers to bring them to motivate policymakers. The first is to convince them that it's better to act before than after the crisis. It's better to invest now for research, for data collection, as you did in the AAU, to collect knowledge, to have this knowledge, to be able to face any crisis in the future. This is an investment now to gather this knowledge, instead of being naked when the crisis will come. So convince them that it's important. The second key drivers is to convince them that, okay, it's a complicated topic, we don't know everything, but there are solutions now. We can act, and it's not always expensive. And raising awareness of school building managers to check regularly the HVAC system, raising awareness to the teachers so that they can open the window to bring fresh air when it's possible, paying attention to the cleaning products that are used in the classroom, to respect the doses, not to mix them. This is not expensive, and this has a real big impact on indoor air quality. So we can act, and it's not always expensive. and we must say this to policymakers. And the third key drivers would be that we must show them that there are benefits. We must give figures. We must convince them that it's beneficial for health of the children, for the health of the teachers, for learning performance, and this is also beneficial for them, for their political career. And this is also important to say them to them. This is beneficial for everybody. So this is what I identify. And maybe a last thing to raise awareness, maybe to provide factual data. There are more and more information. We are flooded with information, and people don't trust anymore in science. So I think we, as scientists, we need to show to policymakers very simple factual data based on research, based on studies, as the studies that you presented to us this morning.
Yes, to be more transparent. I totally agree with you. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Corinne. And now, most of us who have been involved in the building construction industry, they are familiar with the term value engineering. I have experienced it in the past where we work with a contractor, or things can be deviating from the design can be deviated from for up to a certain level during construction. So Avinash, you are a senior director, and I'm sure you experienced this in the past, where you have got like a design of the school, it's in a very good shape and maintaining the optimum levels of indoor and environmental quality for all occupants. However, this is not going to be the case later on in the future, where several design features have been value engineered. So Avinash, what advice can you give to ensure that deviations from the design does not compromise indoor environmental quality for schools? Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Is the awareness which will matter in this case. I mean, we have regulations in place from municipality here. They are doing it very good in terms of regulations, and we have all the regulations. But what needs to be done is that some of those things can be like mandatory, and in terms of getting the approval, building approvals and regular checks. I mean, like Dr. Ali said, sampling is very important, and the regular sampling will help in getting the right validating like what exactly the design was meant for. So we have seen like value engineering is very common these days, but it's the awareness which will tell the stakeholders that okay, I mean, there are some items which can be value engineered, but items which are affecting IUQ, I mean, you can't play with those things. So it's the awareness. So like the way KSDA here in Dubai does yearly assessment for the schools. I mean, there can be assessment for the IEQ where you publish the air quality data, and those data will be based on something like real-time monitoring, or some agency can do those samplings. So it's awareness and the regular sampling which can help in reducing those V's and making sure that all the measures of IEQs are taken care of.
Thank you very much, Avinash. Okay, and now if we look at the number of schools and the existing building stock of schools, like for the building typology of schools in UAE, we can see that more than 50% of the schools that have been constructed and developed before the building regulations. I mean, for example, in Dubai, the green building regulations in Dubai, and so we can see that there are so many existing schools. I don't want to say all of them, but many of them, they are not like in a very high standards. So we know that there are many new schools, and for example, we have got Fair Green International Schools. So Graham, as a leader and a senior staff in the Fair Green International Schools, our school, it's a relatively old school. Okay, the school which have been considered in this study. So from your experience, what advice would you give to those old schools? Okay, in balancing the educational quality of the school as well as the health and well-being of the students and the staff. And we're talking about the indoor quality, for example, daylighting, thermal comfort, indoor air quality, and acoustics. Thank you.
Thank you, Walid. First, just to say, although health and well-being are absolutely part of our core business in schools, I think unless you're a secondary science teacher, you probably don't know a great deal about VOCs, IEQ, formaldehyde, which is why I think sessions like this are so important to help our sector upskill ourselves by learning from experts like we have today. So the more collaboration is really important. We know that there are so many factors that impact student learning, you know, from socioeconomic status, quality of the teacher, and now we know from research that air quality is also one of those factors. For new schools, of course, I think it's easier to build in these features, but we can also retrofit for older schools as well. And I've been in the situation of being founding director here at Fairgreen, but also in older schools too. I think it depends on our priorities. So how we spend our money and how we spend our time are governed by what we value. And if we value children's health and well-being, then those have to rise to the top of our priority list. As I said, we're fortunate we're in a new school here, so our school was built, you know, deliberately to have low VOCs and VRF air cons and many factors like that. Could we do more? Absolutely. We all need to prioritize and maybe address, I think, one element at a time. But one important thing for me, I think, is as well as school leadership playing a major role, I would definitely mobilize students and have them take responsibility for measurement of air quality, CO2 levels, TVOCs. I know here at Fairgreen, as a sustainable school, whenever we have a single-use plastic that's found maybe in our cafeteria, my inbox just explodes and it's full of emails from students to say, hey, you know, we call ourselves Fairgreen, we've got a bit of plastic here. You know, so kids are great change agents. Ask an adult to give up smoking and, you know, maybe, well, maybe, possibly not. If you ask a child to ask an adult to give up smoking, I think you see a very different response. So definitely ask students to come up with a plan. And within the International Baccalaureate program that we run here, these make great and highly relevant personal projects or extended essays, which are mandatory areas of study in the IB. You know, the science around VOCs, air quality, CO2 levels lends itself to terrific and hugely appropriate learning opportunities for all. And clearly they're so important for not just, as Katrina said, not just the well-being and health of our children, but of everybody that works in the building. And as we know, learning is an art and a science, and this is part of the science of learning.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Graham. Yeah, very interesting. And if we would like to see the opinion of the authorities from the governmental and authority point of view, we know that addressing indoor environment quality is not a simple issue, and it's challenging. It's challenging for one governmental authority to address all these parameters together, okay, and driving actions for such improvement, especially for public schools. So Abdul Alim, you have been working with before in UPC, and now it's the Department of Municipalities in Abu Dhabi. So what do you think, while the educational authority can play a vital role, they do oversee the school codes, and they still cannot, the educational authority, they have got a vital role, but they still cannot oversee and manage the building codes and requirements. So how can we ensure that there is proper coordination and cooperative action taken across all governmental bodies to address indoor environment quality in UAE schools? Abdul Ali.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And again, thanks for inviting me to participate as part of the panel. In relation to the question that you've asked, as we've seen, indoor air quality is actually determined by a large number of factors, including quality of the outdoor air, the type and the condition and age of the building, the furnishing, etc., and even the way the occupants' behaviors are within the building can actually impact IEQ. Consequently, as a result of this, there are different professions that are involved with dealing with and resolving indoor air quality challenges, making it one of the most truly interdisciplinary fields that exist. And this is no doubt reflected in the way and the area of legislation if we look around the globe, where many countries still do not have specific legislation related to indoor air quality. Consequently, there's often no single authority that has the full responsibility for indoor air quality across all building types. This is even more challenging if we look specifically at identifying a single authority for schools, and more so if we try to have this authority engaged at a federal level. So if we look at both local and federal levels right here in UAE, we can identify a number of entities that are concerned in one way or the other in relation to indoor air quality. Possibly in order to enable better centralization, harmonization, and cooperation, perhaps there needs to be some sort of federal task force comprising of representatives from all the different concerned agencies, such as, but not limited to, the environment, health, planning, construction, standard setting bodies, specification setting bodies, research, and certain aspects of industry need to be engaged in such a task force. This multidisciplinary task force could help build on the comprehensive and scientifically sound action plan that we have seen today. They can use this as a baseline for improvement and setting targets now for new construction. And as you mentioned, almost more than 70% of some of these existing schools were built prior to regulations, so that indoor spaces could be established and targets established at both a national and local level. To be successful, the action plan would need to be updated to consider specific conditions to each emirate, including, for example, local air quality, operational maintenance practices within each emirate, type of building material used, and certain incidents of IAQ-related challenges that happen in these schools. So while both federal and local entities have a major role to play, industry also needs to take appropriate contributions to the achievement of better IAQ in schools. For example, product labeling procedures, where they are available, should be adopted by the designers and specifiers and eventually installed and implemented by the contractors. For example, right here in Abu Dhabi, the Quality and Conformity Council has deployed certification schemes for exterior and interior paints, and another separate scheme that deals with adhesives and sealants, both of which directly support the Estidama Pearl rating system in terms of indoor air quality related material emissions.
Indeed.
But moving from a regulatory approach, as Graham mentioned, another area of focus worth exploring is engaging with school employees and students, since they are in an ideal position to be leaders in creating a healthy indoor air quality within their environment, including managing air quality. One such way can be through curriculum reform to include appropriate education on the importance of IAQ, and subsequently engaging students in practical exercises to monitor and manage IAQ, giving them a sense of ownership of the challenge and an opportunity to work alongside all the parties involved to make a difference. Assessing their own school's IAQ impact and managing it would help students understand the dynamics of their relationship with the indoor air quality environment. And I hope that I'll have an opportunity to discuss this further within the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdul Alim. Yes, I totally agree with you. Getting the schools and all the stakeholders involved is going to be very beneficial for everyone. Now, we know that Dubai municipality, they have carried out some research in indoor environmental quality and also indoor air quality. So we would like to ask Engineer Mohammed to shed some light and to share some of this work with us. Engineer Mohammed, can you please tell us a little bit about the research and the investigation in Dubai municipality? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me at the beginning thank you for organizing that useful webinar with all different stakeholders to share all our knowledge today and the suggestions that we have in matter of improving the environment of the school in UAE. In the matter of, if we are talking about the school in the Emirates of Dubai, we are at Dubai Municipality Health and Safety Department, have a full program of controlling and inspecting all the educational institutions in the Emirates of Dubai. If we are talking about the categories of that inspection, we are talking about all health and safety categories in matter of safety, in matter of health. If we are talking about matter of health, we are talking about the indoor air quality and the water quality, and of course the hygiene and the food safety. And in matter of indoor air quality, as you know, and as my colleague mentioned, we have different type of building today in Emirates of Dubai, and similar to all different cities in the world. We have old buildings and we have new buildings, and we are living here in almost hot weather and very humidity weather. So we need to take into consider that. Also, we have a lot of effectiveness which is different than other cities of the world. We need to take into consider that matter also. And we need to take into consider also we are people almost spend almost 80% of their lives indoor because of work, spending at cars, schools, etc. So let's back to our research about the schools that we made it in the Emirates of Dubai here. We did some researches as per our control program. It's part of it also to take some samples and some reading from schools in matter of all indoor air quality parameters and the building fatalities to check their compliance of all requirements that as per green building and as per other government requirements that need to be comply in all educational institutions. As per those readings, we took those readings, we analyzed those readings. In last 3 years, we did 2 researches about the evaluation of the environmental risk in the Emirates of Dubai, including the educational institutions, including the schools. We did some more samplings. We did more than 100. We did samples from more than 100 schools in the Emirates of Dubai from different type of building. We did from old building, from new building. We are comparing all the results that we get, and we are now in the last phases of those studies to start concluding what we study and what the corrective action which will be done, inshallah. Already we start with the corrective action and some initiatives. I'll mention it to you, inshallah, later on that discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Engineer Mohammed, for sharing this useful and valuable information with us. And I think now we are just exceeding our time by a couple of minutes, and would like to apologize for that due to some connection problems at the beginning of the session. And I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you for all Saint-Gobain team and for all our panelists for their time to join us in this interesting discussion and this event. And we can all see this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning, and there is huge amount of work needs to be done, and it has to be collaborative work between authorities, private sector, public sector, all together. We have to join together, and so we are looking forward to develop and advance this work further. And I would like also to say thank you to all our participants, okay, and the audience who joined us for this event. And finally, I would like to say we will look forward to see you soon as part of development of this work. And thank you all. Thank you very much for your time and for participating. Thank you. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, dear panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, I am once again just going to send a reminder to everyone attending this webinar. So thank you again for your support, for your time, and for joining us today on this very important publication. It is through concerted action that we can move towards improving the indoor environment of not only schools but of the building sector and the built environment. As a reminder, you can download the report. It's free to access on our website at EmiratesGBC.org under Making UAE Schools Healthy. You can check out our publications as well, and also please check the Emirates Coalition to see how you can further support the transformation of UAE schools to green schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Speak less. You don't get to speak less.
Yeah, everyone did one. Yeah. No, it was, I mean, you know what happened? I was slightly confused. The one that, sorry.